857th contact Saturday, the 29th of July, 2023, 12:17 HRS.
Hello, Pa. I just had to kick Jacobus out because you wanted to come in the door and he looked to see who opened the door, which I closed again, but saw no one because you quickly disappeared again. So he also left quickly when I waved at you and asked him to leave. So I guess he saw me waving at you when you materialized in the office, but he still left quickly. But be welcome and greetings, although I am surprised because I thought you had already left.
No, I am not yet, and I must come again to tell you that Quetzal is still absent for 6 or even 9 days or more, as no one else can be present to do the work that is normally done on Earth. However, I will be on Era for a few more days, but I will come again on Tuesday or Wednesday because I still want to think about the information paper and then bring my proposal to you. Here, for example, I think the peace symbol and overpopulation symbol should be inserted. However, I will still think about this and...
It's okay. And if Quetzal is absent for a few more days, that's not the end of the world. Maybe Safar, the twin brother of Sfath, will turn up, and then the time will not be so long.
Yes, but Safar will certainly not come here more than once because...
I do not think so either, because it will probably just be a visit for a reunion, which will be that.
It will be. That's what I think anyway.
Yes, so do I. Well, we will see.
You are taking it easy.
Anything else would not be of any use.
Of course not.
That is just the way it is. Besides, if he only comes once, instead of having to take contact reports in and write them down, I can use the time to do some other things and devote myself to the subjects and write them down, which I wrote as a boy and which are good for the development of self-confidence and correct thinking, and therefore real and true thoughts and behavior, which your father Sfath stored at that time, which should actually be recorded in his annals, as well as in the Plearan's memory banks, whereby I could call it up and really write it down. Sfath also took it back in time and gave it to an American who had it translated into English. Unfortunately, I have not heard anything more about it. All I remember is that Sfath went back in time about 50 years and said that he knew someone there who was interested in my long article because Sfath had just told him about it. At that time, I also coined the word illusory thoughts. For example, I wrote something to the effect that the majority of humanity, because it is religious or worldly believing, only occupies itself with illusory thinking, but does not cultivate correct and truthful thoughts. Consequently does not analyze effective reality, and the real truth can thus never be found. Only individual human beings can find it if they discard their religious and worldly beliefs and turn to effective truth, reality, and its incontrovertible truth.
This is really a subject worth writing something elaborate about, and thereby bring about a general enlightenment that should have been brought since time immemorial. That you wrote something about this in the 1940s is indeed recorded in my father's annals, as it is elsewhere, so you can retrieve it and write it down if you're interested. I think it would also be important to detail.
But that will then also be to the wind for the bulk of humanity. For this is, after all, religiously and worldly faith-oriented. Consequently, reality and truth are not in demand.
Unfortunately, that is unchangeable and...
Perhaps it will be understood in the distant future. But what has been so ingrained from time immemorial, such as religions, is something that the earthlings will not be able to free themselves from so quickly, and consequently hatred, revenge, war, and destruction will continue to be rampant on Earth. Since the earthlings have made gods and religions out of the foreigners and those who have come from far away, and have also sparked religious wars out of them and demanded human sacrifices in their delusion of God, this delusion of religions has remained until today. The majority of the Earth's population is delusional about religion and effectively resists reality and its truth. Therefore, even as a small boy, I recognize through the enlightenments of your father Sfath that one can only recognize reality and its truth if one can recognize and understand what one sees, hears and otherwise perceives in some way as reality and truth, only if one effectively really and truly cultivates one's own thoughts, thoroughly analyzes everything, and investigates everything in great detail. But this is not possible if the human being believes, religiously or secularly. And consequently only an illusory thinking is possible, into which faith constantly sparks and makes it impossible to perceive and recognize reality and its truth. Out of this religious or worldly belief arises all that goes wrong with the earthling, namely his greed, addiction, and delusion for something or other, such as money, might, rule, wealth, or land. This, however, has also revenge and retaliation stir in him when something goes against him, as when another human being is of a different mind than himself. When a human being lovingly turns to another and he himself is written off, he does not get what he wants, etc. The human being who believes only believes and holds fast to his illusory thinking and brings harm to himself, which is what I want to say with a poem I once put together. Faith is the believer's ruling power, which forges him and creates the evil in him. He is only believing and swollen by it in himself. His illusory thinking is his tool of willing. His faith only deludes him with false joys and brings him evil hope and suffering. By his faith he breaks the seal of life, therefore his life is only a mirror of his thoughts.
What you say here is also actually so, but this is certainly understood only by Earth humans who are capable of self-thinking and are not influenced by any religious or worldly faith, and so are only illusory thinkers. But I am interested to know how you came to create this term.
Well, how did I come up with it? That's a good question. Actually, it was simply because I thought that a believing human being is just thinking in appearance, whereas a human being who is really thinking is just thinking effectively, thinking reflectively, in accordance with reality and seeing truth. So he is thus thinking correctly.
But this way of thinking will certainly only be understood and also comprehended by those human beings who are free from the influence of faith. But it would be really good if you would recall and write down what you wrote at that time. It would also be good if you could make a booklet out of it.
That may be, but I cannot say it any other manner, and for me to retrieve it and write it down, I want to think about that.
That is good, and it would be necessary and instructive for Earth humans.
That may be, at least for some.
But if we now speak of all that my father Svath has written down, I am really astonished that you really stick to it and keep silent about what will take place in the future, but that you only speak openly about it when the time really comes, when it can no longer be avoided, and everything will take place. You, that is Father, and you have always gone to the place of future events, so also concerning the ND results, so you know exactly what will happen in the end.
Yes, but Svath has expressly told me to keep quiet about it, and never to mention anything of the events that will take place in the future. This is especially true with regard to, for example, the outcome of the in-between, as well as with regard to the bad consequences concerning the, and as far as this is concerned, that I hold back, that I only say something that I have seen and experienced with Svath when the time comes for it to happen. I do not always think about it, because I do not mention it openly very early on, or not at all, because I do not think about it at all. What is so present, however, that it is a daily topic of conversation on earth, is of course also present in my mind, but that is precisely what I am not supposed to talk about, but to keep silent. This is precisely because it would be generally unbearable for human beings to know in advance and have knowledge of what will come about, as for example concerning that as a result many big-mouthed will cut their own fingers and they themselves must be responsible for that, which, however, they cannot do, and the chaos in the... But what I tell you here I will not write when I call up the report of the conversation, but simply make dots there where I think I must not mention it openly.
That will be good. And besides, those of the state leaders would, our committee which, as you know, directs the entire destinies of all the peoples on Era, declares that the bulk of all the state leaders on Earth are composed of utterly unscrupulous elements, to whom the peers of the respective populations would not be inferior in unscrupulousness and stupidity. It is effectively incomprehensible to the committee that, In view of the prevailing technical and medical and all other developments on Earth, the states and peoples are still so primitive that they are hostile to each other, do not strive for unification, and consequently wage wars.
That would require logic, understanding, and reason, as well as no longer believing, but recognizing reality and its truth. Religious and also every worldly belief would have to disappear, as would every partisanship. Only in this manner could we finally work towards real peace and avoid all forms of war. So there would have to be, as with you, a united world and only one globally responsible body. Consequently, individual countries would no longer have to be ruled badly, murderously, and greedily for power and wealth by autocratic elements.
That would be correct.
But those are dreams in this world. Religious and secular beliefs would have to disappear before such a thing could happen. But something else. Would it be possible for me to visit the poles again next time? There I saw many huge caves together with Svath, and I would be interested to see in what condition they are today, after some 80 years.
There should be nothing to prevent that, and if you ask Quetzal about it, he probably will not mind. It is, however, regarding the...
I know that, especially in Antarctica, there are...
This is...
Yes, the foreign, actually. We have talked about it many times. But what's the point? Namely, nothing. What true love actually is, however, is obviously a problem for many Earthlings. But we have also dealt with this topic many times and always only privately. Now, however, a very religious woman telephoned me and asked if I could say something about it from our point of view.
Of course, and you can do that as well as I can. So you explain what is to be explained.
As you wish. Then I will seek to find the correct words. Good. In order for love to be understood correctly, it is to be said that it is not boastful towards fellow human beings, and not such that it needs to be explicitly mentioned, but that it is simply brought to bear. True love tends towards kindness and patience, is not fickle and never changeable, but is all constant, persistent, ironclad, and never allows for inhibition, for comeliness, bitterness, devaluation, uptightness, or sullenness, etc. True love is never hurtful, whether in terms of decency or physically, or in any other manner, just as it is never concerned with personal gain or resentful. It also never allows itself to be provoked or led astray under any circumstances. With regard to truth, it is the foremost commandment, just as it also unquestioningly takes upon itself everything that has to be done dutifully, which maintains it in honor and dignity. True love never loses the knowledge of reality, truth and hope, and endures infinitely, and never fades. True love is not only the true content of life, but it embodies all that is hopeful and overwhelming, all that is good and truly human. True love is such that it never falls into any unrighteous deed, and does not harbor jealousy, insolence, or intentions of any evil. True love is an eternal state and attitude of immutability in every sphere and situation of life, and it decides the human beings to become love itself. True love prevents all cold-heartedness, domination, selfishness, revenge, retaliation, overreaching, etc., as well as that there is no subordination, but equality as well as equal rights, and thus never subjugation. Pursuing true love means that the human being submits to it and always does what is best for his fellow human beings and for himself, as well as for the animal world, the world of animals, and the world of living beings, and for the entire world of nature and plants. True love means to respect and fulfill one's own demands exactly and to hold them in honor and dignity, as also those of one's fellow human beings, the animals, the animal world, and the living beings, and all genus and species of plants, from the tree to the blade of grass, moss, the waters and microorganisms, etc. True love means true life, and true love is constantly growing, like life. And true love means the good and the beautiful, the best, the right and the valuable in all ways of life and existence. And true love is above all, whatever it is of the best, the good and the right, and it constantly and always ensures the practical presence and realization of the best, the good, and the right. True love is the perfection of all that exists itself, and constantly strives for its own growth in the process of living, existing, and being present in everything and everyone. This is actually what can be said in a nutshell, although there is much more that could be said. But I think that with my explanation the broad outlines have been stated.
That is explained in the manner we really understand true love, but there would be, as you say, much more to explain about it. But now I must go because